Hi everyone, welcome to LA Legal. I'm Liana, and as always, I'm joined by Nima Romani. And today's guest is Gina, so please introduce yourself and we'll take it from there.
Thank you both for having me. My name is Gina Ojenian. I just recently went solo, founded Ojenian Law Corp. I am mainly doing criminal defense at the moment, but I do have plans to branch out to other fields of law. And I am very excited to be here with you both as I'm a very avid fan.
Thanks for being here.
Of course, we're excited to have you, and we love criminals and we love lawyers, and we got a criminal lawyer here, so doesn't get better than that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about today's subject, though, who frankly I didn't know a whole lot about until Gina.
I'd never even heard the name.
Really?
So
Wow.
So let's take it away. Known as the cocaine godmother, or the Black Widow, Colombian drug lord Griselda Blanco entered the cocaine trade in the early 1970s. While Pablo Escobar is perhaps the biggest known kingpin of the 80s, it's undeniable that Blanco paved the way for him. From motorcycle drive-by shootings to home invasions, Griselda Blanco was one of the deadliest women in the entire cocaine trade, Colombian cocaine trade. So, fascinating. Like I said,
To say
never
the
heard
least.
even of the name. Have you?
Yeah.
no, I have not, and I don't know if this is a situation where a man was taking credit for the hard work of a woman, but it sounds like she was the one who was doing the heavy lifting for
Yeah.
the Medellin cartel.
Yeah. Well, it almost sounds like, I mentioned that she paved the way for Pablo Escobar, who is, I don't know if anybody out there doesn't even know the name,
Right.
but, it sounds like he kind of took what she started and ran with it and became, the king of cocaine.
Right. It
If you will.
actually, in most of the documentaries, it's very well noted that, everyone knows about Escobar. Everyone knows of him as like he's like the cover person for that whole cartel and everything that has to do with that. But she really is the one that basically was the one that paved everything for him and a bunch of other people. And the fact that she was a woman and did everything that she did was successful in a very male dominated what is it like what do you want to call it industry
Field.
so to speak field was that's what attracted me to her in the first place, like the things that she achieved and in the end how she actually got off was just beyond amazing. Like I don't think that if that happened today, obviously, I'm 100% sure it would have been a different ending to her story, so to speak.
You know what this just made me think of? This podcast, we're now in season 3, and we cover a lot of like murders and serial killers and whatnot. And there was one, I forget her name now, which I shouldn't, but she was the only female serial killer that we talked about. And like, who?
Sorry, it's Eileen Warner.
Yes, Eileen Wuornos. And even then, like I don't remember even hearing about her. So it's kind of interesting that you have these women who are just out there killing it in a man's world.
Yeah.
And sorry, I had to.
I mean,
But and we don't really know about them. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, look, obviously, we have a criminal defense lawyer. We do personal injury law, but we also practice employment law. And women are consistently being discriminated in
Yeah.
the workplace, including in the drug cartel organization.
Including.
They want to work their way to the top, and it's these men that keep them down despite their efforts, despite their hard work. Griselda Blanco, you deserve the credit. I stayed at Pablo Escobar's former house in Tulum, Casamalca,
Really?
but that is the home that Griselda Blanco, the Black Widower, built.
Wow.
Pablo, stop claiming credit for Griselda's hard work.
right?
Hashtag preach.
Yeah.
Well,
But let's talk a little bit about, how she became the godmother and or Black Widow, whatever you want to call her, right? And so we've talked a little bit about this in most of our podcast episodes about sort of nature versus nurture, right? And so you have this kid, she at 11 years old commits her first murder, like in cold blood, right? I don't know if you guys know this.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
talk about it. It was a
like,
kidnapping,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
she kidnaps a little boy her age, holds him for ransom. The parents don't take her seriously. Obviously, he's 11, and she just shoots him, kills him in cold blood. So what do you guys think about that?
Honestly, when I saw that, and I actually had read about it before, but when I was watching documentaries, I recalled it, and I was just thinking that's my daughter's age right now.
I was just gonna say, you guys both have kids that age.
She did that right now. It's like nothing, and then she
Yeah.
just continues on being like ending up being the most noted drug queen ever.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's we can hear about it, we can like read about it, but in reality, it's just, I mean, I don't know, so immersive to even think about, and just like the fact that as always, we always have to incorporate psychology, especially me when I'm on a new case and trying to defend someone. Always, I try to, as much as I can, obviously put myself in those person's shoes, understand why they did what they did, allegedly, or where they're coming from, and obviously it always goes back to their childhood, and there's something that forms them to the person that they end up being. It's just in the way that she started was just like, I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard anyone have that kind of situation when they were young, and then they just go
Well, she sounds
all
like a
ham.
homicidal maniac.
Yeah,
from
just
the get-go.
ruthless.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we spend a lot of time on the show talking about nature versus nurture, and we're lawyers, but we play a little bit of psychologist on the side, and we talk a lot about violence against women and crimes against women, and here's a woman that really got a little bit, maybe a little bit of revenge, probably responsible for the deaths of hundreds of men. It started at a young age, obviously with that young boy her age, but look, someone who's willing to kill not just one, but two husbands. I mean, that's why she's the Black Widower, in cold blood, to take over the business. Well, one she killed herself, and one she ordered assassinated.
Yeah.
But I think, whacking two husbands really puts you in really unique territory. And here's someone that's been glorified. I mean, one of the reasons we're talking about her is, Netflix is doing a documentary, 6-part documentary. Sofia Vergara
is playing. Is it a movie? Is that the documentary that she's in, or is there a separate movie?
I believe so.
There is a separate movie.
Yeah, and then there was and then she was previously played by Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Yes,
Right.
Yes.
Yes, that's the one. That's more of the popular one.
Look, I think I agree with the both of you, right? I mean, if you are able to commit these crimes at 11, I mean, at 13, she meets her first husband, Carlos Trujillo, and he's the one who kind of teaches her about the passport forgery. And that really is what kind of starts her trajectory into this, not drug cartel, but just liar, schemer, fraudster, if you will. So, this is someone who, and I believe I read somewhere that her mom would traffic her too, and so maybe that's all kind of where it started from. But yeah, so let's talk about the two husbands, right? So Carlos Trujillo, she's married to him. They have 3 sons together, and then he mysteriously dies of like liver failure, right?
So to speak, yeah.
Mysteriously in his 20s. And then she marries again. She marries Alberto Bravo, and this is the guy who introduces her to the cocaine trade. So take it away.
Right.
Yeah, so apparently there's this gunfight,
Yeah.
and he has an Uzi. And she still manages to kill him. I mean, this is straight out of like Scarface. I mean, this is crazy stuff. She kills him and she takes over the business. The first husband, just someone who, was responsible for some of the most brutal murders you'll ever see. I mean, this is stuff of fiction. This is like Kaiser Sose stuff, where you kill your own loved ones because of the type of sociopath you are. But really, someone that can do that, certainly willing to kill anyone.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I thought was fascinating at this point, right? So their scheme is, right, so they buy cocaine in Bolivia and Peru. They transport it through the unguarded borders to Colombia, and then from there they repackage it in Medellin and ship it off to New York and So here's what I thought was fascinating, right? This is I think the prime example of how women sometimes, like, right, she's a woman in a man's world, but what does she do? What is her way of repackaging it, right? So she starts building garments, right? And so they're able to put 1 kilo of cocaine per, what do they call them? Drug mule. So she hires these.
Is this underwear? I mean, what kind
But
of
it's like lingerie, right?
But
but
it's like in your underwire. I mean, again, I don't know, but
but I mean, the way from my understanding is that they start making undergarments that are so shapely that they just feel like a woman's body, and these women just cross the border, no problem. They're beautiful, and they're hand selected to look a certain way. They flirt with, the folks at
they
the
get the
border.
job
What does
done.
that tell you about
They're
our
getting the
borders
job
in
done.
the 70s?
Even still
Exactly.
to this very day, when
Yeah.
I was a prosecutor, and obviously I prosecuted drug trafficking cases, and still the cartel, they use beautiful women, up until 10, 15 years ago when I was handling these cases myself, to try to traffic drugs into the United States because they think that federal agents, customs and border protection officers, they're more likely to let a beautiful woman go through than some dude that looks like me.
Right. At some point,
I
I
don't.
think.
I don't think that's the cutoff. I think it's a lot scarier looking men. But
Right.
but no, I just to me when I read that I was like, wow, this is just such a good example of her making use of something that men just would not know, right? Like you wouldn't know how to build these undergarments. You wouldn't know how to make things fit a certain way where you can just kind of fly under the radar. So I thought that was really interesting and clever and successful.
She had a whole production from what I read from, and she literally had, I think, I don't know how many hundreds of workers like stitching and doing these things so that they can catch up to the actual
Yeah.
drugs that are going to be transported
Yeah.
through these means. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are fascinated with her, because she was, I guess, street smart, but at the same time she knew how to, she just devised these methods to in her favor. Everything was in her favor, like
Right.
even whacking her husbands, everything was in her favor. Everything.
Well, and once these drugs hit the streets of New York, it was like within hours they were, everywhere. And that's actually what caught the NYPD's attention, right? Is because this new type of drug is all of a sudden like readily available on the streets. So talk to us, Nima, a little bit about, as a prosecutor, someone who's dealt with cartel and drugs, right? So what is the internal process, right? So NYPD catches wind of this, and then what happens? They transfer to the DA, or what happens?
Yeah, so I mean, this is where sometimes the criminals are ahead of law enforcement. Obviously, I mean, most of us who are sitting here at least grew up in the 80s or know enough about it. This is the heyday of the cocaine trade, right? And this is something that, you start transitioning out of the 70s, psychedelics and stuff, cocaine becomes huge. When I was a prosecutor, for instance, was when methamphetamine became really popular, right? DEA did a good job, shutting down the labs in the desert in California, all moved south of the border, and then Mexico, they create these super labs. They're pumping out methamphetamine, and highly addictive, purely synthetic drug. People get really addicted, and there's no Colombians involved, anyone in South America. So you kind of see the transformation of drug cartels with methamphetamine now, but back then, I mean, it was really cocaine that created the Colombian cartels. You have a product that was very popular, frankly, is still very popular, and just like the people that got in early on crypto, you got in early on
Yeah,
cocaine,
exactly.
you're going to make a lot of money
Yeah.
in the 80s.
Yep,
And
they jumped the
Griselda
bandwagon.
Blanco was,
Well, isn't this also the time where you have like your John Gotti's of the world and like the Italian mafia, and they're also like buying it, selling it, transporting? Yes, no.
yeah, I mean, think
different
about
era.
it. Like, you
In
look
New
over
York.
time, right? No, like, how did the mob get started, right? With prohibition and alcohol, right? I mean, people want to drink. So obviously, look, it sort of evolves over time. And then, of course, they get into other businesses, gambling, extortion. But, whenever there's an illegal product and there's a big demand, I mean, it's just ripe for criminal organizations to get involved and to fill that demand. And that's
Right.
what we're seeing here.
Right.
Whatever is forbidden and not allowed is always more interesting, right, for people. So I think they just boomed in it, and I think a lot of people don't know she actually I believe started with marijuana in the beginning, and then when the cocaine got
Yeah.
There you go.
away with.
Marijuana is a gateway drug.
Yeah.
people.
completely.
Your Middle Eastern parents were
Yeah.
not wrong when they when they told you not to do it.
But I think the interesting part was where I think there was so many, well, 3-4 agencies involved with this specific case, and it took such a long time to actually bring her to before the justice system.
Well, she has her first Carlos Trujillo to thank because he taught
Right.
her how to be the damsel of disguise.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's indicted in New York in the 70s, right? I think, was it 75? And she takes off. She goes back to South America. And then, you know me, I love my fun facts.
Tell us.
Ends up in Orange County, California, my hometown. She's first seen in Newport Beach, where my parents currently live, and she's ultimately arrested in Irvine, California,
Right.
the safest city in the country, by the way, in the mid 80s when I was there. One of the most dangerous people in the entire world.
Very ironic,
That's where she's
yeah.
finally caught.
And like 11 years later, she's not arrested till 1985. So,
Yeah.
what does that tell? And mind you, she's going in and out of the country at this point during that decade, right? It's not like she's in Colombia or just in Orange County. She's going in and out of the country, between the coasts, right? And so every time, my understanding is she uses a different passport. And because she does that, there's no photos of her, so nobody knows what she looks like. The DEA doesn't know what she looks like, and so all of the detectives on her case don't. There's nobody that knows what she looks like except for her little, like, what do they call them? Drug mules, cartel mules, whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important for everyone to understand how the drug cartels work, right? The people running the organization, they go nowhere near the drugs, right? They make a phone call, they tell, like, Javier, send 4 pollos, to whatever. And the product moves. I'm not trying to be facetious, but it's like,
Yeah.
Griselda's not actually, trafficking the drugs herself, right? She has her people underneath her. So when you're investigating, you're prosecuting these cases, you have to get those lower level folks to flip. You arrest them, you prosecute them, you proffer them, and you get information. And I always say it's like peeling back the layers of the onion. You kind of peel, you peel, you peel, then you get to the top. That's why you've kind of all seen those famous org charts, like, where there might be a question mark at that, because they don't know who's running the organization until they actually find the person that has direct contact with them.
Well, they are ultimately able to find her, or at least get some information about her through another female. And the way they do that is they give her immunity, right? And they give her the opportunity to see her family again, right? Because she's serving, I think, a 20-some year sentence in prison. So she agrees to flip, and she gives them information. So is that something common? You guys would obviously know, Nima, you would know as a prosecutor. Is that common? Do cops or, prosecutors go searching in the jails for informants?
Well, yeah, so when you're dealing with drug cases in the federal system, they have minimum mandatory sentences. It can be 10 or 20-year minimum mandatory sentences based on a number of factors. And one of the only ways to get out from that minimum mandatory, to get less than 10, is to what's called proffer, which is called the 5K proffer for anyone who's watching, does federal criminal work. That's the sentence. That's the portion of the sentencing guidelines. Or what's called a safety valve. Anyway, essentially it's the same thing, but you got to come in and you got to rat and you got to squeal and you got to be honest. And for the drug cases, it's particularly important because that's how you get information out of other folks that are involved.
Right.
And most people, I mean, there's so much pressure to flip, to save yourself.
Right.
You're going to get years off your sentence. That's why almost everyone ends up cooperating.
Well, I see how that works, right? Because it's like, you're going to let some low level, like street dealer go, but ultimately you're going to get the drug lord potentially. So I see how that's, for law enforcement and prosecution, it's a no-brainer.
The one of the most interesting things I found for this case was those people that actually flipped got more time than she actually did. So it was just like all around for her. It was just that's what was just fascinating to me. Like, how does that happen? And
Well,
then
I would say she got lucky. We'll talk about it, but
Yeah,
she got lucky with that,
Yeah.
the
I think
murder
luck was a factor.
case,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
luck or the conspiracy folks in us will think maybe it was more than luck. But yeah, let's talk about it.
Right.
So she finally gets arrested. She's sent to New York. She's convicted, of course, for an 841 conspiracy to manufacture and distribute cocaine. So gets her 15 years. But of course, then they want to charge her with murder.
Isn't that too little, though?
It is too little.
I mean, in today's, if it was relevant today, I highly think that's
would she
what
be getting
would've-
15 years today?
No way. I mean, she'd
Yeah.
be charged with all sorts of overt acts and furtherance of this conspiracy.
So why do you think she was not?
I think, frankly, they didn't have the evidence, or they wanted to prosecute her on the original indictment from 1975. Sometimes you just want to put her in custody, then you have leverage, and then you can prosecute her for the murders down the road. But here's someone that was pretty elusive, so they wanted to kind of take the readily provable case, and then they decided to go after the murders, right? Because again, obviously she was killing folks earlier in her career, but later she was just calling the shots, right? And then the motorcyclist or whatever would come by and they would kill someone. So you need to make sure that you have the actual gunmen, assuming they're men, maybe they're women. I'm not trying to be presumptuous here, but you want to make sure that those people say, hey, I did this because Miss Blanco is the one who told me to do so.
One of the things I think a part of her deal was that she couldn't be prosecuted for any murders that she was involved in for like before 1975 or something like that, and it was just like, wow, she just really got off. Like there's no tomorrow.
Well, it's said that she maybe not herself, but she's ordered the killing of anywhere between 500 to 2,000 people. That's a lot of folks.
Massive.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them obviously nothing to do with the cartel, civilians,
People
she'd
that
shoot
owed
up
her
a mall.
money,
Yeah.
People that
Well,
she owed
people
money.
she owed money to, she'd be like, oh, don't feel like paying you, I'm going to shoot you.
Or
That's
how about
crazy.
when she killed 8 strippers who were flirting with one of her husbands?
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
And
That's
shot the husband that many times as much as that he had relations with those strippers or women.
I'm telling you, homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
So she's in prison. She ultimately ends up serving 13 of the 15 years, and then we go into the murder trial, which I mean, it's funny because this is it. I want to hear the conspiracy theory because I didn't think of the conspiracy.
Well, yeah. So
But-
I don't know. It's just insane that. So let's talk about what happened, right?
Right.
So go ahead, you take it away.
So again, the younger folks who are watching won't know what this is, but there's this phone sex scandal. So back in the day, well before the internet, and you could talk to random people, you would actually call a phone number, and you would talk to someone over the phone. I don't know how else do you describe phone sex.
Yeah.
Like
Just assume it is what it sounds like it is.
yeah, people,
Yeah.
I mean,
People did some weird stuff.
yeah, this is before people were sending nudes and stuff.
Yeah,
You have to
this is before Snapchat
Way
and what's
before.
Snapchat, right? Snapchat and text
So-
messaging.
The point is, there's this phone sex scandal where the witnesses who are testifying against Blanco, right, the murderers, or at least one of them, is having phone sex with a secretary. Back then it was a secretary,
Yes.
but probably now a receptionist or an admin.
Yeah.
At the prosecutor's office. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
can't.
So,
And accepting gifts too.
All of the above, and
Yeah.
well, I don't know if that's where you're going with the conspiracy part, but there's so many people that say in their mind that he devised that to basically prevent from himself from being killed, or like with the rest of them, because he probably thought that Griselda was he was going to be next on her list. But I don't know, that's what I thought the conspiracy would be. But
Well, by he, we're talking about Jorge Ayala,
Right, the
who is
actual
the star witness.
yeah.
He wasn't the actual hitman. So just to kind of backtrack a little bit, the murder that we're talking, or one of the murders we're talking about, is 2-year-old Johnny Castro, who was accidentally killed by a hitman when they were trying to kill the dad, unfortunately. Really sad. Which, by the way, when she found out, she got super excited. She was like, this is great.
Yeah,
So this
he deserves it.
tells you the level of crazy. And so they're put on trial. And so Jorge Ayala, so there's no DNA at this time, right? So,
Yeah, sure.
So we want to talk about that. So no DNA, there's no hard evidence. So really this whole trial is hinging on his credibility.
Right.
And boom, all of a sudden he is,
Involved
engaging into phone relations with, secretaries. And so there's so there's that appearance of impropriety, and the entire case blows up in flames.
yeah, I mean, your star witness is now getting impeached. You have all sorts of issues with the witness. You basically got to fire sell the case, and they basically give her a 20-year concurrent deal. So not even a consecutive at the same time, which was basically giving the case away, unfortunately, under the circumstances.
Yeah. So it seems like it went from being like a slam dunk case to no case at
Yeah,
all.
a terrible case.
Well, I've got a little fun fact for you too. So this was in Miami, right? And then the case gets transferred to Orlando. Guess who gave her the plea deal? None other than Jeff Ashton, who lost the case to Casey Anthony.
Right.
Oh.
All right. A little fun fact.
Wow. There you
Yeah.
go.
There you go.
So,
Talk
it
about bringing that full circle. I've talked about her for the entire season.
It was interesting too because I really wanted to find some type of a statement from him, from that prosecutor, with respect to all of this. But only thing I found literally was like, I guess really didn't, or they didn't want to comment much on it. But besides the fact that if they just tried the case, that they could have been successful on it. But
So let me ask you, Nima, before we wrap up. So their decision, in my mind, to not prosecute, obviously, is because of, again, no hard evidence, right? And at this point, what are you going to prosecute her on? Is that why they chose to give her a plea deal, you think? Or
I mean, obviously, I think it's a couple things. One, they didn't want to lose. Two, they didn't want the prosecutor's office to be on trial, right? In a very public and embarrassing way, right? I mean, that's a pretty big scandal when your receptionist is talking to a criminal defendant, a felon, a murderer, an accomplice, a co-conspirator. And they're probably thinking, well, regardless of what happens, she's being deported, right? Because she's been convicted of a drug trafficking offense, murder. So she's going to do a life sentence in Colombia.
yeah,
So she's sent to Colombia, and she doesn't get life. She gets something short of life, right?
yeah, she gets killed.
She gets killed.
Yeah.
In the same way
In
that
the-
she would kill people.
right,
So,
same methods.
Talk about a movie. It really is a movie.
yeah.
The whole
So,
thing is really
motorcycle
ironic,
drive-by.
It's a circle of cartel life.
right.
Circle
You know?
of life.
Yeah.
Enter cue Lion King
Yeah.
music.
Right. Rise and fall.
So, yes, the rise and fall of Griselda Blanco. So, final thoughts before we wrap up.
I think that the topic obviously itself interests me. That's why I wanted to, touch upon it today. But like I said, referring to these people and going back in like history and then seeing what the whole everything about it, the strategies that was used, everything, especially by the justice system, especially her as a person. I think that we definitely learn from all of that, and we move forward. But we, so to speak, have to have these type of people in society, I think, because that's how we determine the good from the bad, and the fact that
I mean, you're setting the bar real low.
not irrelevant of the fact of, everything that she did. We're not, we don't even want to go there, obviously, all the immorality and everything that took place. But it's just, we learn a lot about humans when we see things like this. And I mean, me as an attorney, when I study people like that, it just helps me to understand and deal with them in a different way than, I probably would have never even thought of dealing with them. And it's just, if she wasn't relevant, Netflix wouldn't have been making a movie about her coming up. It's just, all in all, I think it just helps us to realize actual human nature, and tells us things from right from wrong, and it's very relevant for us as attorneys on a daily basis.
Yeah, so my thoughts are, obviously, this country has a fascination with killers, right? It can be serial killers we talk about, mass killers, but, there's something about female killers that really, really, and, maybe because they're underrepresented, maybe because they are particularly violent when we really analyze them, given how underrepresented they are in this community.
I think it's because you think of them as more maybe like maternal and
Right. They
nurturing,
would
and
not
so it's
be part of it.
unexpected.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, someone that names their own child Corleone, that like really embraces this criminal culture. Let's be honest. I mean, statistically, it's not a sexist thing. Statistically, much more likely for a man to be a criminal, right? So when you have someone like this that's really risen to the top or the bottom, whatever you consider, of this criminal enterprise in the world, it's something unique. It's something you don't see. And my heart goes out to all the victims. But if someone really killed hundreds and hundreds of men and escaped justice for decades,
almost
It's a
5
story
decades.
that you
Yeah.
do not typically see, so one that's probably worth telling.
Right, and that's what makes it fascinating. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope
Thank
this
you,
was
guys.
as fun for you as it was for
Yes,
us.
it was very
Nothing
fun.
like talking about cocaine and
Right?
crazy
Yeah.
killers, homicidal maniacs. And for all of you at home, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.